Good evening, everyone. 20 years since the Rebbe feels like a very long time. In many cases, it's approximately a generation. And for more than 20 years, I have known and proudly supported the work of American Friends of Lubavitch, seeing firsthand here in Washington the work which the Rebbe envisioned and inspired. I think perhaps the greatest tribute to the Rebbe is so many years after his passing, seeing the enormous, sustained growth of his efforts literally across the globe, in which to this day continue to inspire young people to pick up and live in new places, often with personal hardship and literally great personal risk. The Shluchim do so with only one overriding goal: enriching and often even bringing Jewish life to so many that would otherwise have none.
My wife and my children belong to a Reform synagogue. I don't think there is any organization, there's any individual in modern Jewish history who has touched and had a more positive impact on the Jewish people than Rabbi Menachem Schneerson Ov Shalom. And it's very simple. Anytime you walk into a Chabad house today, you feel a warmth, an acceptance, a love, and a welcoming that is so often not available in our Jewish institutional walls, in which we as Jewish organizations are working to make more friendly all the time. So for all of us here today, we're honoring not just a memory of an individual who had a great impact, but whose literally his legacy lives on every day that you interact with somebody from Chabad, whether it's Rabbi Levi Shem Tov or Rabbi Shalom Reichik, Maisi on 28, or Rabbi Mendel Blooming, or anybody else I've seen here. And that's a feeling, and that's a value we can't beat. That is a sense of expression that is desperately needed more than ever today in the world.
I'm here to bring greetings from the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington, and thank you to Rabbi Shem Tov for inviting us. It is a real pleasure to co-sponsor this wonderful event. Rabbi Schneerson wrote, "This is the key to time management, to see the value of every moment." Chabad lives that every day, helping to strengthen the fabric of Jewish life everywhere, never wasting a moment or an opportunity in the quest to building a caring, educated, and moral Jewish community.
I look forward to a wonderful event. I was backstage before and met the author and Dan Raviv, and they were bantering it up. I think you're going to be in for a lively and interesting discussion tonight. Thank you.
An honor to be here. George Washington University, great place. We have fantastic sponsors tonight, and this is a terrific book. That's the author, Joseph Telushkin. The book has a simple title, Rebbe or Rebbe.
You see, the book is a biography of a man who passed away 20 years ago. But boy, if you know anything about the Chabad movement, and you know anything about Chabad houses in dozens of countries around the world, but I think it's a lot more than that. And Joseph Telushkin, my first question that I'd really like to know is, how would you sum up, if the Rebbe was, and he was, the leader of a worldwide movement, that he himself grew to these vast proportions, he was the leader of what? Not just a Jewish sect. What would you say it is and was?
Well, he was a world Jewish leader. I think he was influenced also, in one regard, living in the aftermath of the Holocaust, as Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, the former chief rabbi of England, actually Lord Jonathan Sacks, put it, if the Nazis had hunted out every Jew in hate, the Rebbe wanted to hunt out every Jew in love. I don't know that the Rebbe ever said that. I think it captures an aspect of his thinking. But as far as I can tell, the Rebbe initiated the first attempt in all of Jewish history to try and reach every Jewish community and every Jew in the world. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I think the Rebbe intuited that any mitzvah could be the step that could increase one in one's Jewish observance, whether it be putting on tefillin, whether it be the lighting of Shabbat candles. The Rebbe said to him, how do we know who's karov and who's rachok? How do we know who's near and who's far? They're all precious to God.
Did he see America as, pardon me, the promised land, the perfect place to be? He himself had his headquarters. It still is the world headquarters of Lubavitch in Brooklyn.
When Ariel Sharon, with whom the Rebbe had a very friendly relationship, when Ariel Sharon said to him, you know, the model in the Israeli army is the commander who goes first. And if you would make Aliyah to Israel, do you know how many tens of thousands of your followers would follow? A great point. To which the Rebbe responded, that's one model of leadership. Another model of leadership is the captain on a ship, and he's the last to leave. Mm-hmm. And the Rebbe made it very clear he did not want any of his emissaries to leave a Jewish community while there was still a viable Jewish community.
Including the smaller ones. Now, I want to ask you this. I was wondering to what extent the Rebbe and the Lubavitch movement reached out to non-Jews.
Interestingly, when the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe's father-in-law, came to the United States, he made the famous comment, America is not different. So when he said America is not different, what he meant, American Jews are not different. And if you taught the mitzvot in a good way and modeled sort of good behavior, you could still influence American Jewry. The Rebbe, though, intuited that America was different. American, by which I think he meant American non-Jews were quite different. There was an openness to Jews in the United States. So the Rebbe didn't want to proselytize to get people to Judaism, but he thought Jews had a mission, children of Abraham, to make God known to the world. There's a remarkable story. Shirley Chisholm was elected to the House of Representatives in 1968. She was the first black woman ever elected to Congress. She gets a phone call from Rabbi Chodakov, the Rebbe's top aide, who says, one of your constituents, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, would like to meet with you, and she'd already met with the Rebbe when she was a candidate. And the Rebbe says, I understand you're very upset. And she said, I am. I'm insulted. I wanted to do work in labor. I wanted to do work in education. The Rebbe said to her, the Agriculture Committee can play a crucial role. Look at how many hungry people there still are in America, many of them among your constituents. She said, that rabbi in Brooklyn taught me that what I regarded as a challenge could well be an opportunity from God. And if there are many poor children being fed appropriately today in America, it's because of the wisdom of that rabbi.
Why did you get involved with this project? Tell us about your family's connections with Chabad.
Right. I grew up in what would be described as a modern Orthodox household, very Zionist-oriented. I went to a Hebrew-speaking school with an enormous affinity and connection to Chabad. So I grew up, my father hearing stories about the Rebbe. On the 12th anniversary, we're about to commemorate now the 20th, I wrote an article about the Rebbe and published it in a fairly secular Jewish journal, The Forward. And in the course of writing it, I came to really come to an understanding, ultimately, of what I subtitle my book, which is The Life and Teachings of Menachem M. Schneerson, the most influential rabbi in modern history.
You were certain of that.
I grew more certain of that as I was working on the book. It's not widely known. Jonathan Sacks,
the British
chief rabbi, said that the reason he became a rabbi was because of the Rebbe. He was planning to become a philosopher or an economist. In the course of speaking to the Rebbe, he said at one point, I found myself in a situation. The Rebbe said, don't use that expression. Say you placed yourself in a situation. Because if you placed yourself in one situation, you can place yourself in another situation. When somebody says, I found myself in a situation, too often they become passive. The Rebbe wanted people to take control of their own lives.
Now, could you discuss the intellectual aspects of Lubavitch? under the Rebbe's leadership? The contents, if you will, the meat. It seems to have been very underappreciated.
The Rebbe was an extraordinary scholar whose scholarship really did span the whole variety of Jewish teachings. So there's a massive intellectual contribution. What I focus, though, on in my book is the contribution of his wisdom, not necessarily even scholarly wisdom, his wisdom in daily relations, and leaving behind a series of teachings that have enabled the movement to grow since his death. I want people to know not just that the Rebbe influenced this whole broad Jewish world in a remarkable way, he has teachings that can change the behavior of every single person in this room for the better. He says, call him right now. He said, I can't call him, it's the middle of the night. The Rebbe said, call him, he'll realize how important it is. He calls him at 3 a.m. in South African time, and the next day prisoners light candles. Anything worth doing is worth doing now. Carmel Levy goes to Brooklyn to meet with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says, I have my own sources in the State Department, and I'm telling you they're going to not let the Jews be killed by the PLO, and that I don't want to just eliminate an entire Jewish community.
If the movement was so focused for years around its one dynamic leader who accomplished so much, how's it doing so well now?
The Rebbe really created, through the body of teachings that he left behind and through the anecdotes that circulate about him, it was like he created what I'd call an oral law, a Torah Shebaal Peh, about how to live. And yet, so people were predicting that the movement would probably decline, maybe even disappear. The proof of the success of a movement, of a leader, is what happened subsequent to the leader's death. So it turned out he really had left behind teachings that could guide the movement. Jonathan once put it, he said, when I left the Rebbe, I reached the following conclusion. A good leader creates many followers. A great leader creates great leaders.
Ladies and gentlemen, our time is up, but I want to commend to you this book.
And of course, we all want to thank the author, Joseph Telushkin. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dan.
And he said, well, he didn't have an answer. He said, but just read it and tell me what you think then. And I read it. And I have to tell you that it changed my life, because I thought I was living my life as a Jew, but this magazine, this publication, introduced me to a whole nother world. And just the fact that the Rebbe loved all Jews, and that he felt that the mission of Chabad was to ignite the spark, the divine spark in each and every Jew, and accept each and every Jew just for being Jewish, was a life changer for me. And in these days when